my high school teacher unknowingly made a crude joke about my work. Like I had been tied down on my seat, my whole body froze. I suddenly couldn't speak, defend myself, or even move. The only thing that had a bit of life left were these quiet, shameful tears rolling down my cheek. While the whole class was howling with laughter, I was in the back of the classroom having a nervous breakdown. It wasn't until the girl who sat next to me realized something was wrong. I wasn't laughing. That's when everyone realized whose work were they laughing at. My memories of that time are pretty fuzzy, but I think the reason why I froze up like that was because the jokes and the laughter reminded me of something in my childhood that I would really rather forget. So, what does this have to do with Korra? First of all, it's important to clarify that I'm no psychologist. The show never explicitly says so, but let's call a spade a spade. In the final season of Legend of Korra, this show deals with PTSD and depression. Now, I am fully aware that PTSD is not a foreign concept in works of animation for children. Anime like Fruits Basket and most recently Steven Universe Future have both explored trauma. However, we shouldn't ignore The Legend of Korra. It's not just a cartoon filled with flashy action scenes. It's a story about trauma and change. Along with their spectacular way of handling PTSD, they've also included a love story between two bisexual women of color. It's also how Korra seems to heal, with Asami by her side. With this rivalry turned friendship turned romance, The Legend of Korra has proven that I ain't ever seen two pretty best friends. Okay, but jokes aside, in 2014, The Legend of Korra was the first time I saw a character deal with the aftermath of a traumatic event, and also go through a process of healing. Surprisingly, years later, it helped me understand my own journey of recovery. So this is why today we will be exploring The Legend of Korra, and how it represents trauma and what we can learn from it. Before we start, welcome to my channel. You probably know me as Bunny Burb on TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter. But for more of this kind of nerdy animation, anime content, click subscribe. Help out the channel. Now, the meaning of PTSD has often been so misused to a point where it's becoming a meme. So, what is PTSD? Well, PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a mental disorder where some people may develop after a traumatizing event, such as a car accident, environmental disaster, or an assault. The symptoms can usually develop right after an event, but then again, it can take weeks, months, and even years to develop. Another similar disorder is complex PTSD. While PTSD usually develops after a single event, complex PTSD is a result of repeated trauma, and it happens with constant exposure to violence or abuse. With PTSD and complex PTSD, most people would associate this disorder with memes like Vietnam flashback, or within veterans who come back from the war. Although it's important to understand that soldiers may get PTSD, PTSD can develop in anyone. Although The Legend of Korra is a Nickelodeon show directed at kids, what Korra deals with is pretty dark. Starting off with Season 3, Korra is kidnapped, tortured, and poisoned by Zahir and the Red Lotus gang. Oh, they're also trying to murder the Avatar, which they believe symbolize a repressive and unfair authorities figure. Okay, but Season 3 isn't the first time Korra goes through something traumatic, though. As early as the first season, Korra gets nightmares of Amon taking away her bending. And this event does become true, in the cruelest way possible, leaving Korra unable to bend any other elements except air. And it's horrible. Amon undermines and threatens her position as an Avatar. Recalling back, Korra even says that bending is the coolest thing in the world. Bending means everything to Korra. While Aang runs away from being the Avatar, Korra runs towards and fully embraces her identity as the Avatar. But by taking her bending away, it is as if Amon has physically disabled her and cut her off from her whole identity. Not only does it strip away her identity as the Avatar, but interestingly, it cuts out another integral part of her identity, her cultural identity. As Korra is coded as an indigenous woman, by losing her ability to waterbend, she loses her connection to her tribe. It's like a language. That waterbending is an integral way of life in the water tribe. A Mon doesn't just take away her status as the Avatar, but also her connection to her home. If it was a Mon who temporarily disabled her, it was Zahir that crippled her physically and mentally. And this is where it gets terrifyingly heartbreaking. Back in season 1, you see Korra as a rambunctious, starry-eyed teen who's just ready to be the most badass Avatar you have ever seen. But despite Katara's best efforts to literally get Korra back on her feet, Korra's just not the same person anymore. When season 4 starts, Korra is stuck in this grimy underground fight club. And it's Korra, the Avatar, getting pummeled by what we see as a shadow version of herself. Furthermore, we learn that during the weeks she was healing, she couldn't fight regularly without being haunted by the visions of her previous attackers. And now we get all the familiar symptoms of PTSD: being unable to sleep, irritability, and through every move, there's a strong sense of anxiety within Korra. And this is frustrating. Sure, she seems physically healed, but her mind isn't. According to Bessel van der Kolk, MD, in his book, The Body Keeps Score, he explored how trauma affects people in later life. He concludes, trauma is not just an event that took place sometime in the past, it is the imprint left by what is experienced on the mind, the brain, and the body. And this is exactly the case with Korra. There's this important scene where Katara is helping Korra up, after she hallucinates Zahir. She tells her, "You're okay. Your body thinks it's still in danger, but you're safe here." Although her body is getting healed, this constant exposure to violence takes a toll on her body, and this makes Korra anxiously hypervigilant. Especially with trauma, the healing process is extremely paradoxical. On one hand, physically your body can heal, but on the other, it's holding you back in fear of getting hurt again. And this muscle memory makes it a long and confusing process. But this isn't the end for Korra. If there's one theme apart from bringing balance to the world, Avatar is also a series about change. In the last season, we see Korra change from a hyperactive hothead into a compassionate and selfless Avatar. Although I do love seeing Korra as this meathead jock, I'm glad the show allowed her to be vulnerable. At first, Korra was marketed as this badass who was not gonna let a bunch of power-hungry creeps push her down. But in reality, Korra isn't that one-dimensional. She can get hurt, she can get sad, and she can change. Change is pretty much this whole show's mantra. At both of these breaking points in Korra's life, she feels as if she's failed everyone, and herself. After Amon takes away her bending, it is only then Korra realizes she needed to change her tactics, and as the Avatar, the importance of her spiritual side. This was how she could reach her previous incarnations, and most importantly, Aang. Here, Aang not only gets her bending restored, he also tells Korra one of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard. When we're at our lowest point, we're open to the greatest change. It's like saying, when you hit rock bottom, the only way you can go is up. However, The Legend of Korra expands on that idea, and emphasizes, we see a whole new, changed perspective to our situation. Through times of grief, there's something new that comes along. This idea is then also echoed in this third season, through Zahir. Quoting an airbender, Zahir tells Korra in the spiritual world, new growth cannot exist without the first destruction of the old. Borrowing from old Hindu philosophy, The Legend of Korra comes to the conclusion that destruction and creation are the two sides of the same coin. No matter what kind of destruction, good or bad, change will follow. To destroy is to create. Although what happens to Korra is pretty crappy, to say the least, she did grow as a person because of this. Sure, horrible things may have happened to any of us, but we can't change the past. We can only acknowledge it, move on, and most importantly, grow from this. This also brings us to the final big bad of the Korra villain quartet. The prettiest fashions I've ever seen, Kuvira. In the series, just like Korra, we learn that Kuvira herself is someone who has been through her own trauma, through her abandonment by her biological parents, and the instability of her own home, the Earth Kingdom, caused by Zahir. This made Kuvira's anxiety fester, and that is why she became a dictator. Despite all that, Korra saves Kuvira's life, and even empathizes with her. I needed to understand what real suffering was so I could become more compassionate to others, even to people like Kuvira. Korra saves the attendant at the last episode, as Kuvira is arrested. The old Korra would not have said that, and Kuvira would probably be burnt to a crisp if Korra was still Season 1 Korra. Now, Kuvira may have been cruel, but she's only human. Trauma causes us to be confused and anxious, and might even make us do some horrible things. But obviously that doesn't excuse Kuvira, and she does pay for her crimes. However, unlike Kuvira, Korra chose to learn from her own trauma. This way, she empathizes with the hurt, and she chose to give mercy. Although Korra had to suffer in the worst way possible, she was able to learn, empathize, and change for the better. This is gonna sound super corny, but Korra really helped me understand what going through trauma felt like. Moreover, this show shows you that you can continue to grow, help others, and do justice despite your mental illness. Sure, it's gonna take some time, but hey, maybe working yourself is just what you need right now. Back to my classroom mishap story, I wasn't exactly in the right mind during those years. After stumbling out of that classroom, I remember I didn't go back to that class for a week. Like Korra, I thought it was gonna be fine. But at the slightest mention of a subject, somehow I was 5 again, hurt, confused, and wanting to run away. When I came back, the teacher apologized, and a few more people apologized too. I guess people were only laughing since they were relieved that it wasn't them who were called out. Furthermore, after a really long chat at the principal's office, I found out that my teacher was also someone who used humor to cover up their own pain. I mean, like Kuvira, it doesn't excuse them, but I understood why they did that. So, what do you think about Legend of Korra's writing with trauma? Or do you think it could be better? Jump to the comment and discuss.
Thank you for listening all the way to the end. If you liked my funny words, or you just like my superior IQ 5000 intellect, then you should consider clicking subscribe, or like this video, leave a comment below. For now, it's Bunny Burb jumping out.
If you're worried about your friend, or just yourself, please don't hesitate to seek help. Your recovery should be your number one concern. Here are some resources and numbers to help you out. Heart's a heavy burden.